Hello and welcome to my channel, Rhino here. Today I'm looking at a video by a YouTuber called JesusFreak777. In this video, he explains why he thinks that all atheists are lying to themselves. So let's take a look.
Hello everyone. Have you ever told yourself a lie?
No, I really do have a big penis, I swear.
I think most of us have. Few of us, if any, lie to ourselves to try to deceive ourselves and make ourselves look foolish.
Nah, if I were to guess, most lies directed at the self would be an attempt to maintain a delusion of some kind, such as my aforementioned huge penis, which isn't a lie, I swear.
I think most of us lie to ourselves as a defense mechanism, right?
Yeah, you hear something that goes against your narrative, and instead of objectively examining the evidence, you lie to yourself. So far, we're roughly on the same page.
Maybe we can't handle the emotional pain that we're going through, or that we feel that we're going to be enduring.
It is painful to me how close you are to self-awareness right now.
Maybe we feel frustrated and feel guilty for our actions, so we try to minimize our culpability.
Yes, often lying to yourself can start with an attempt to throw a more favorable light on yourself than would otherwise be the case. In fact, studies have shown that every time you remember an event, your brain actually rewrites the memories of that event, which means that every time you remember any event, large or small, your brain is lying to you in one way or another. And if you have a vested interest in the outcome of certain events, then your brain will naturally tend to remember things in a way that will attempt to make your preferred outcome more likely. So if you want to get technical, we are all lying to ourselves about everything that has ever happened to us.
Whatever the reason is, usually we lie to ourselves because at the time it's easier emotionally for us to deal with.
Sure, I suppose I can agree with that.
And why is this important?
Because it's often an argument against atheist activism, suggesting that allowing people to continue to have their delusions is more beneficial than whipping the rug out from under them. The hypothetical scenario is usually brought up of somebody on their deathbed. How mean would it be to try and deconvert them as they lay dying when their belief in the afterlife gives them some comfort in their final moments? The problem here is that I have never met a single anti-theist who is gung-ho enough to actually do that. If my mother is lying on her deathbed and she asks me to pray with her, I will bloody well kneel down and pray with her. That's not the time for a discussion on theology. But just because faith can bring comfort in one very limited scenario does not mean that it should be left unchallenged in all scenarios.
I believe that atheists are lying to themselves.
Yeah, because Romans 1 says that we all believe deep down in our hearts and just want to live in our sins, right?
I've talked to a lot of atheists through the years. And usually, if you ask why a person is an atheist, they will give you this long list of reasons.
Yes, most of us do have a long list of reasons. Reasons that you must address if you want to have any hope in being able to convert us to your version of Christianity.
And they're quite often different. But I believe that the core reason is that ultimately people don't, in general, want to be responsible to someone else for our actions.
So they list a bunch of rational, logical reasons why they're an atheist, and your rebuttal is, nah, that's not it. They're lying to themselves because they don't want to be accountable to anyone. Really? You don't see a potential problem with ignoring their actual arguments in favor of explaining to them that you know what they believe better than they do? Do you think that tactic will actually convert anyone, or are you just trying to reassure yourself that there really can't be a good reason to be an atheist, so they must be lying to themselves? Do you not see the irony of that position?
Usually, we just kind of don't want to be judged, right?
It depends on the situation. Sometimes we do want to be judged honestly, so that we can figure out an area in which to improve ourselves. A kid who has just finished a piano recital doesn't want to hear, I'm not judging. They want to hear, good job. And sometimes, depending on the age and maturity level of the kid, they might want to hear something along the lines of, good job, but this area could use a little work for next time. So whether or not we want to be judged is entirely dependent on the situation. True, we would prefer to always be judged favorably, but anyone with any real sense will know that it's not always going to happen that way, and to pretend otherwise is not a productive course to take.
Now, if I go punch someone in the nose, sure, I should go apologize to them. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah, but apologizing is not judgment. Judgment would be if you were convicted of assault, and no amount of lying to yourself will overturn that conviction, and most people understand that. Although some don't. Looking at you, Hovand.
I should be held responsible for my actions by that person. But boy, if I hate someone in my heart, or I commit adultery, or I do any of these other things that are seemingly victimless things.
How is adultery victimless? I've never seen anyone say that adultery is victimless. Unless you're referring to Jesus' adultery in your heart line, where every time you think someone is cute, you're committing adultery, because that is victimless. Here, watch this. Hey, Mrs. Rhino, what do you think of this guy?
He can have me any day.
You just committed adultery in your heart! What's for dinner?
You can cook it yourself, Rhino.
See? That's victimless. I do not expect my wife to be blind just because we're married. Now, actual adultery? That can have real-world consequences. I don't know of any atheist who thinks actually cheating on someone is a victimless crime. Hating somebody is mostly victimless, depending on how big your obsession with hating them is. If it's just a thought of, oh man, I hate this guy when you see them, then that's pretty harmless. But if you actually stress out about it when they're not there, that can cause elevated stress levels for yourself, making you the victim. It's like the old adage that holding a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. But are you suggesting that we should be held accountable for these victimless crimes? Thinking someone else is attractive literally does no harm to anyone, and hating someone but not acting on it does more harm to yourself than to the person you hate. So please, tell me why you think my wife deserves to be tortured for all eternity for thinking this guy is hot, when it doesn't even bother me, the supposed victim of the crime.
Who is anyone else to judge me, right?
Well, for thinking someone is attractive, nobody should be judging you on that. Everyone has different tastes. Honestly, you should not be judged on your thoughts, you should be judged on your actions. Yes, your thoughts inform your actions, but if it just stays a thought, it literally never does any harm to anybody except perhaps yourself.
Well, as a Christian, I know that God has the right to judge me.
Why? What gives God the right to judge me if he exists? Because he created me? Why does that give him the right to judge me and to hold me to a higher standard than he holds himself? When he gets mad at people, he can just flood the world and kill them all. But I'm not even allowed to have so much as a bad thought towards someone who annoys me. Why does God get so much leniency in the judgment compared to humans? We have to be morally perfect, while God gets to kill and pillage and enslave anyone he likes. Not to mention that whole torture chamber for anyone who doesn't like him. Or worse, anyone who didn't believe in him despite a complete lack of evidence.
He is a perfect and righteous standard. The holy standard.
I wonder, in what context is genocide perfect and righteous? It always makes me laugh when I see Christians trying to defend the genocides commanded by God in the Old Testament. It usually goes along the lines of, those people were sacrificing their children, they burned them alive in a bronze bull, that's horrible! So clearly the logical response to people killing some of their children is to kill all of their children. Definitely no way that could have been handled better. I totally couldn't think up a better plan, like not killing all the babies. I mean, even if you justify the killing of the adults with the baby sacrifice thing, there is literally zero reason to kill the babies. They didn't do anything. They were about to be killed by these horrible people who were going to sacrifice them to their god. Much better that they die at the hands of the Israelites at the command of the Hebrew god.
And while I may not like being judged, I understand that it's fair.
Yes, in some circumstances, judgment is fair. However, eternally torturing Mrs. Rhino for getting a little bit damp in the nethers when she sees a brawny red-headed Scotsman is not one of those circumstances, especially not after God specifically made the reproductive urge so strong and then forbade it.
And I abide by it, and I kneel before God and say, okay, you judge me because you are my creator.
When the creation displays better moral character than the creator, then that creator has lost all right to judge the creation.
I believe atheists simply cannot stand that. They cannot fathom that, and they won't accept it.
Not so much won't accept as can't believe. I am physically unable to believe in a being with so many clearly contradicting characteristics, such as being the perfect moral standard, yet also committing genocide. Those two characteristics don't jive well. Either God is completely morally perfect, or God committed genocide. Since genocide is immoral, these are mutually exclusive characteristics. You cannot have both.
That's why if you ask an atheist quite often, if you believed, or if they prove that God was real, would you believe in him then? Quite often atheists will laughably, they don't realize it's laughable, but they will say, no, I still wouldn't believe in him.
I have never seen an atheist say they would refuse to believe in him. I've seen several say they would not worship such a monster, but never have I seen anyone say that they would refuse to believe if provided with sufficient evidence.
But a shrewd, intelligent, and intellectually honest atheist would say, of course I'd have to believe in him because he was proven.
And most atheists that I'm familiar with are intellectually honest and would indeed say that. Now, atheists are a very diverse group, so I'm sure there are some out there somewhere who would say that they refuse to believe even if provided proof, but I'm confident that they're in the minority.
But, they always have a but.
I need a new but.
But I wouldn't serve him because he's not a righteous God. He's not a good God. I'm more righteous.
I have never heard an atheist use the term righteous like that. Replace righteous with moral, and you're pretty close. In fact, I've basically been saying that through this video. So how do you explain how God can possibly be moral and have done the things that the Bible says that he did? Or will this just be a how dare you question the Creator kind of thing?
Usually the atheists will talk about how they have this system of right and wrong that is far more noble and more fair than the Heavenly Father's plan, so...
Well, that was incredibly awkwardly worded. It's more that atheists have to think through their morals and come to conclusions based on logic and reason rather than just blindly obeying what the Bible or the clergy tell them is moral. And again, not all atheists have a carefully thought-out moral system, and plenty of Christians do. But I would argue that Christians with a carefully thought-out moral system are borrowing from humanism rather than the atheists borrowing from Christianity.
They find a way to remove God from his high and lofty stature, and they put themselves above God by acting as though they are better.
I have never killed anyone in anger, not once in my entire life. God has. I have never stood by and watched someone get raped while having the power to prevent it. God has done that with every rape in history. I have never required anyone to kill an animal in order for me to forgive them for something. God has. If God is real and it's the God of the Bible, he is complicit in every atrocity and every crime in human history by virtue of the fact that he was there and had the power to stop it and chose not to. If God is real, and it's the God of the Bible, then he is at a minimum complicit in every death due to disease, natural disaster, starvation, what have you. Every kid who gets cancer, every expectant mother who loses their child, everything bad that ever happens or has happened, God is, at a minimum, complicit in allowing it to happen. I have a much cleaner record than your God.
You see, we lie to ourselves. We act as though we're better than God.
If God exists and is as described in the Bible, then we are better than him. And that includes you, even if you don't want to admit it.
That there is no God because we are afraid. It's kind of a defense mechanism that our sinful nature encourages us to do. To say, no, there's no God. Let's push him out of the equation. We're going to justify our sin. We're going to justify our wrongdoing.
Even if you're not directly quoting it, I can hear Romans 1 dripping out of that statement. Does someone who's convicted of, say, tax evasion and fraud avoid going to prison if they just deny that they're guilty and pretend like they've done nothing wrong? No, they still go to jail. Atheists understand this. Most of us, if we really knew deep down that there was a God judging us, would not think for an instant that pretending that God doesn't exist is a good way to avoid judgment. And I'm sorry, but waving away all of God's clearly contradictory characteristics by saying that we really do believe deep down inside is not going to convince anyone. It's dishonest at best and arrogant at worst. Apologia has a video on why Romans 1:20 is a terrible verse for evangelizing, and I highly recommend that you go watch that.
Lying to ourselves is something that is foolish because while we may successfully lie to ourselves, we can never lie to God, our Creator.
Yeah, no atheist has ever considered that the all-knowing creator of the universe would be hard to fool. We still just lie to ourselves in the hope that we'll trick him, and then what? What is the end goal of this lie? Get into heaven? Do you honestly think that any atheist expects to die and have fooled God about our unbelief to a point where he'll just let us in on a technicality? What would be the purpose of lying to ourselves about the existence of God?
And God will convict us and let us know, hey, who are you kidding? You're wrong here.
Yeah, but to go back to the courtroom analogy, if a Supreme Court justice murders someone, they are not above the law. They are impeached and criminally prosecuted. God has murdered a bunch of babies. Impeach God, then we'll get his replacement to judge people based on merit instead of belief.
Usually we come to that realization. Unfortunately, there are some that want to continue lying to themselves.
And those people have convinced themselves that they know what atheists really believe, despite the atheist offering sound arguments to the contrary.
Hence atheism. People pushing God out of the equation, pushing pushing God out of their lives.
Yeah, more like people realizing that God was never part of the equation to begin with.
And that is unfortunate. I personally believe every atheist out there is lying to themselves.
Well, it's nice that you believe that and all, but it's only true in the sense that I explained earlier about how we're all technically lying to ourselves because our brain is a douchebag that doesn't record things properly.
And I think deep down, God lets them know that they're doing that. And I pray that if you're an atheist and you're lying to yourself that there is no God, I pray that you will listen to that still small voice that's talking to your heart.
You have to open your heart. Open your heart. Look inside your heart. Your heart. Your heart.
Well, I just prayed that if God is out there, he'd give me a sign. And the first thing I heard was someone on a TV show that my wife is currently watching say, "I giggled." So that sounds like God giving me a sign that looking for signs like that is laughable. So that's basically where he leaves it. He just spends the rest of it telling you to ask Jesus into your heart. But I'm left with more questions than answers here. I really want to know how you reconcile a loving God who wants to have a relationship with you with the genocidal monster that is portrayed in the Bible. You brought it up yourself, but you never addressed it. You just shifted topics, and that's where you asserted that all atheists are lying to themselves. Is that really how you do it? You just ignore the horrendous morals that God displays in the Bible and pretend that anyone who can't just ignore them are just lying to themselves? From my perspective over here, where I actually know what I believe and that I don't believe in God, it looks like you're just plugging your ears and going la 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 la. So please, tell me how to reconcile God's horrible morals with my half-decent morals, then we can talk. Thanks for watching, remember to follow me on Twitter and support me on Patreon. See you next time.